My sister kicked me out of her wedding, saying her fiancé's got a thing for me. Now he's called off the wedding because of it. Hey everybody, I'm Michelle, 20 years old, and I'd really love to hear your thoughts. Emily, who's 25, is my big sis, and she was supposed to tie the knot with Jonathan, also 25. Everything seemed perfect between those two. We genuinely thought they were a match made in heaven, especially since they'd been an item for ages. But things have recently gone completely sideways, super unexpectedly, and now the wedding's up in the air. The reason? My sister doesn't want me at the wedding, so Jonathan's refusing to go through with it. On top of that, Emily's convinced Jonathan's crushing on me. I know it sounds totally nuts, but let me break it down. Just to give you some context, I'm not tight with my folks or my sister. I kinda went my own way after heading off to college. It's not like we had some huge blow-up though. Ever since I left for school, I've barely hung out at home. I'd usually hit the road or crash at my grandparents' place during breaks instead of going back. Honestly, it felt way better than dealing with the awkward vibes at home. Here's the deal. I'm nothing like my sister or parents. We've just never really been on the same wavelength, if that makes sense. I don't really fit into their world, which is totally their own thing. They never seemed to get me, and honestly they never really tried. Growing up, they'd all geek out over stuff I couldn't care less about, and whenever I tried talking about my interests, it was like I was speaking Martian. They'd just listen, give a nod, and steer the conversation back to what they liked. So, after a while I just stopped trying. But here's what stings the most. They didn't even try to reach out when I started pulling away. They seemed totally cool with me fading out of their lives, almost like they were relieved. Honestly, that hurt. You'd think family would notice when someone's drifting away, but they didn't seem to care one bit. It just confirmed what I'd always felt. I didn't belong with them. Eventually, I only showed up for the big stuff like birthdays and holidays. But even then, I felt more like an outsider looking in. I'd show up, do the family thing, and then bounce. The chats were always polite but shallow. There was no real connection, no warmth, you know? Plus, Emily and I never had that close sisterly bond that some siblings have. She's always been the star of the family, the one who aced everything, followed the path my parents set out, and fit in perfectly. I was always the odd one out, the black sheep. They're not terrible people or anything, but they have this way of low-key dissing me that makes them seem like total bullies. You know those little comments that seem harmless but actually cut deep? Yeah, I'd get those. Eventually, I figured it was just better to steer clear of them as much as I could. Why put myself in a situation where I felt awkward and out of place? The thing is, when Jonathan came over for Christmas dinner last year, for the first time in forever, I didn't feel completely invisible. My family has this knack for making me feel like a stranger in my own home, like I don't belong. But Jonathan didn't treat me that way. Instead of acting like I was some weirdo, which is how I usually feel around my family, he was genuinely nice and chatted with me like I was a normal human being. I didn't think much of it at first. It was just basic manners, right? But for some reason, Emily got super weirded out by it. It's not like Jonathan and I were having some secret, deep conversation. We just talked about random stuff, travel, school, funny work stories, everyday things. But Emily seemed off about it from the get-go. I tried to brush off the icy glares she kept shooting me during dinner. That is, until she confronted me directly later that night. I'll never forget that. She pulled me aside and said, "I see what you're up to, and you've always been jealous of me, trying to steal my boyfriend." Honestly, I was floored. Steal her guy. Seriously, where did that even come from? Even after I told her she was being ridiculous and laughed it off, she wouldn't drop it. She kept saying I was being too friendly with Jonathan and that he was acting weird around me. It was such a wild accusation that I didn't even know how to respond. Where was this even coming from? Emily's always been the one who loves being the center of attention. My folks adore her. She's their perfect little angel. She's their golden child, I get it. But accusing me of trying to snag her fiancé, that was a whole new level, even for her. Like I usually do with her theatrics, I tried to tune it out. I figured she was just feeling insecure or stressed for some reason, especially since we're not close to begin with. The problem is, after that night, things got weird between everyone. I didn't think Emily could get any more distant, but she did. Even though we were never close to begin with, she seemed to be going out of her way to avoid me now. If I tried to talk to her, she'd either act like she couldn't care less or give me one-word answers. At family gatherings, she'd stick to Jonathan like glue, as if she were staking her claim. It was ridiculous. Jonathan, though, acted like nothing had changed. He stayed polite, friendly, and normal around me. What really ticks me off, I guess, is how my family seems to just go along with Emily's craziness. There were subtle hints, but nobody ever said anything to me directly. My mom would give me these weird looks whenever Emily and Jonathan were around. My dad, who's usually pretty detached, started talking more about the importance of relationships and supporting family. It was all super passive-aggressive. The more I thought about it, the angrier I got. I've never been one to get involved in other people's drama, especially not my sister's. Why would I suddenly be interested in Emily's fiancé when we barely even talk outside of family stuff? Made zero sense. A few months later, I found out about Emily's engagement from my grandparents. Yep, I wasn't even told directly that my own sister was getting hitched. Finding out from my grandparents was a real kick in the gut, even if I wasn't expecting her to send me a personalized, glitter-filled invitation at this point. You know, the kind that just proves your family doesn't really care about you. I guess I was still holding on to a tiny bit of hope that, despite all the tension and distance, she'd still consider me a part of this huge moment in her life. Hey, we're sisters, right? Thought. We might not be close, but I'm still family. Clearly that was asking too much though. When I found out about the engagement, I didn't say anything to Emily. At first I thought maybe she just forgot to tell me or she was super busy with wedding planning. For some reason, I was still giving her the benefit of the doubt. Even though I know that sounds dumb, I figured she'd eventually give me a call or at least send a last-minute invite. But days turned into weeks and nothing. Total silence. Then, out of the blue, I got a call from Emily. Since we hadn't really talked since that weird accusation at Christmas, I have to admit I was surprised when her name popped up on my phone. I answered, trying to sound casual, like my own sister hadn't completely forgotten I existed. After a few awkward minutes of small talk, she dropped the bomb. I'm not inviting you to the wedding. I was silent for a moment, trying to process what she'd just said. Even though I wasn't exactly dying to go or anything, it still stung to hear her say it out loud. When I asked her why, she gave the most insane explanation. I don't want you there because Jonathan has feelings for you. It'll just be awkward. I had to laugh, like actually laugh out loud. I couldn't believe this was happening. First of all, Jonathan doesn't have feelings for me, and even if he did, it wasn't like I was going to stand up during the ceremony and profess my undying love for him. It was so ridiculous that I didn't even want to argue. I just said, have a great wedding and a happy marriage, and hung up. It didn't really matter to me whether or not I was a part of her big day because I didn't need that drama in my life. And honestly, we weren't close. Emily and I were living in completely different worlds, and I'd accepted that a long time ago. However, I just needed to vent and maybe get an outsider's perspective. Am I the only one who thinks this whole situation is bonkers? Has anyone else been through something similar? Any advice would be much appreciated. Date 1. I need to get this all down while it's still fresh, because yesterday was a complete whirlwind. Emily's rehearsal dinner turned into a total disaster, and somehow I got dragged right into the middle of it. My phone started blowing up while I was having a typical Thursday night, curled up with my laptop working on a project. At first I decided to ignore it. I've gotten pretty good at that lately. However, in under 10 minutes, I noticed I had 7 missed calls from my dad. Now, my dad doesn't call more than once. He's the type who figures you're busy if you don't pick up right away and he'll try again later. 7 calls though. Something was definitely up. He was shaking when I finally answered. He sounded like a completely different person. Michelle, you need to get to the venue right now, he said like a broken record. Right now. When I asked what was going on, he just replied, it's about Jonathan and Emily. Just come, please. His voice was so desperate that I was a little freaked out. But here's the kicker. Did they really expect me to just drop everything and rush to their rescue after all the drama, accusations, and being excluded from the wedding? I told him exactly that. Remember, Dad, I'm not invited to this wedding. Emily made that pretty clear. Michelle, please, he responded. Jonathan won't go through with the wedding unless you're there. That stopped me in my tracks. What? Before I could even process that bombshell, my phone buzzed with another call. This time from Mom. She was sobbing, like really sobbing, when I switched over. Your sister needs you, she kept saying. As if she'd forgotten how they'd all treated me for the past few months. It was bizarre to hear her crying about sisterly love and family loyalty when they'd been perfectly fine without me until things went south. Then Emily called, in a complete mess, barely making any sense. Apparently, Jonathan showed up for the rehearsal dinner and immediately asked where I was. When Emily told him I wasn't invited, he lost it. But it was more quiet and disappointed than angry. He announced, in front of their friends, the wedding party and both families, that he couldn't marry someone who would treat their own sister like that. He said he couldn't be part of a family that would cast someone out like that after seeing how they treated me. Emily sobbed into the phone. He said I was just like Mom and Dad, and he didn't want to be around such toxic behavior. If I'm being honest, a big part of me felt vindicated. Finally, someone had seen what I'd been dealing with for years. In fact, someone had stood up and said it wasn't okay. But Emily wasn't done. In between sobs, she started outlining this elaborate scheme for me to come to the venue and pretend there was a huge misunderstanding, and that I was the one who chose not to attend the wedding, claiming it was all my idea. We can fix this, she kept repeating. Just come and tell Jonathan you never wanted to come to the wedding. Tell him you were never excluded. Michelle, please, I can't lose him. It was all incredibly bold. It's ridiculous that after months of treating me like a man-stealing villain and being told straight up that I wasn't welcome at her wedding because her fiancé might be attracted to me, she wanted me to lie to save her relationship after making me feel like garbage within my own family. I let her cry on the other end of the line for a good long while, not saying a word. Then, as calmly as I could, I said, I'm not going to lie for you, Emily. You're dealing with the consequences of your choices to ignore me and treat me like I didn't matter. It's not my job to fix it. But he'll listen to you. She practically screamed. He believes in you, I replied. Maybe he trusts me because I've never given him a reason not to. Maybe he's questioning who you really are because of what he's seen in how you've treated me. Either way, I won't be at the event, and I won't be telling lies to make you look better. She was still ranting when I hung up. I then made myself some tea, turned off my phone completely, and sat down to really process what had just happened. My phone kept lighting up with notifications for the next few hours. I checked it and saw voicemails from my parents, missed calls from Emily's friends, and texts from relatives I hadn't talked to in years. The whole family seemed to have rallied together to try to pressure me into cleaning up Emily's mess. But guess what? For the first time in my life, I felt completely certain that avoiding them was the right move. Jonathan alone had seen through their actions. Not because of anything I'd said or done, but because of how they'd treated me. He'd come to that conclusion. And honestly, that felt like the biggest validation I could have asked for. Last night, I went to bed without my phone, and I slept better than I had in months. For once, let them deal with the fallout of their own actions. I'm done cleaning up other people's messes and being the family scapegoat. My grandparents, who are the only relatives I still talk to, told me this morning that Jonathan isn't answering calls from Emily or my parents. It seems he's told his family the wedding is definitely off. My parents are scrambling to control the damage, Emily's a wreck, and I'm just here, finally at peace with my decision to stay away. I know this is long, but I needed to get it all out. I appreciate all the comments on my previous post that validated my decision to keep my distance from my family. You were right. Sometimes it's best to step back and let others deal with the consequences of their own behavior. Day 2. A lot of you asked about my earlier years and the reasons for my long-standing estrangement from my family. Since it's a bit of a heavy story, I didn't go into it in my original post, but given recent events, I think now's a good time to unpack some of it. The core issue is that I struggle with social anxiety. I always felt like something was off with me as a kid, but I could never put my finger on it. However, my parents were old school and believed mental health issues were just excuses. They'd often say things like, "You need to toughen up," or "You're just being dramatic." If I ever showed signs of anxiety or a panic attack, they'd call me weak or lazy, as if I was choosing to feel that way. Looking back, I can see so many red flags. I had this major presentation for English class when I was 15. The thought of standing in front of 30 students was a recipe for a social anxiety disaster. I couldn't sleep the night before, and I felt physically sick the morning of. I begged to stay home and told my parents. My dad's response: "Life doesn't stop because you're nervous. Stop making such a big deal out of everything." I ended up having a full-blown panic attack in front of the class. My voice started cracking, some kids even started giggling, and my hands were shaking so badly I couldn't hold my notes. The room felt like it was spinning, but I couldn't leave. Instead of offering comfort, my mom just said, "See, you survived. All that drama for nothing." Emily, being the perfect sister, made everything worse. She was student body president, captain of the debate team, and pretty much everything I couldn't be because of my anxiety. When she had big groups of her friends over, people would comment that I was the weird sister who never came out of her room. I overheard Emily tell her friends once, "Yeah, she's just antisocial. She thinks she's too good for everyone." College was a turning point for me. My first semester was a complete meltdown. Being away from home, adjusting to new social situations, and trying to manage my anxiety while keeping up with classes became too much. I remember sitting in my dorm room, gasping for air, feeling like I was dying. My roommate, bless her heart, saw something was seriously wrong and practically dragged me to the college counseling center. That's where I met Dr. Martinez, the first person who actually listened to me. She didn't tell me to toughen up or minimize my feelings. Instead, she helped me understand what I was going through. After a few sessions, Dr. Martinez suggested I see a psychiatrist for a proper diagnosis. Getting that diagnosis of social anxiety disorder was like finally putting a name to the monster I'd been fighting my whole life. It wasn't attention-seeking or being dramatic, as my family had always claimed. It was a real condition, and more importantly, it was treatable. The therapy sessions were eye-opening. Dr. Martinez helped me see that my family's behavior wasn't just unsupportive, it was actively harmful. She taught me about setting boundaries, advocating for myself, and recognizing toxic patterns. That's when I started to consciously distance myself from my family. What really bothers me, though, is that when I tried to explain my diagnosis to my parents, they completely dismissed it. "These doctors are just trying to make money by labeling everything a disease," my mother actually said. Emily chimed in, rolling her eyes, that I was just using big words to justify my antisocial behavior. I made one last attempt to explain things to them last Thanksgiving, before all this wedding chaos started. I had prepared a whole speech about social anxiety, complete with research and statistics. "Michelle, when are you going to stop making excuses and start living in the real world?" My dad interrupted me mid-sentence. I realized then that they would never change. They would never try to understand. They had this fixed image of me as the difficult child, the dramatic one, the problem. And you know what? Realizing that was strangely liberating. It made it easier to stop seeking their understanding or approval. Looking back, I can see how this dynamic played directly into the wedding situation. My parents' quick acceptance of Emily's story without even questioning it, and Emily's rapid jump to believe I was stealing her fiancé. It's all part of their long-held narrative that I'm the one who causes trouble and needs to be managed. Jonathan saw right through this. He observed how they treated me, how they minimized my feelings, and how they made me the scapegoat for everything. And he called it out for what it was: toxic behavior. unlike everyone else in my family's orbit, who just accepted their version of reality. I guess what I'm trying to say is, this wedding drama wasn't an isolated incident. It was the culmination of years of family dynamics where I was consistently painted as the bad guy, the problem child, and the one who needed fixing. Maybe that's why Jonathan's choice feels so validating. Someone else finally noticed what I've been experiencing for years. So, yeah, that's the backstory that many of you asked for. It explains why I'm not in a hurry to fix things right now. I've spent far too many years trying to change how my family sees me, to get their understanding, and to earn their acceptance. I'm done with that. Accepting that some people, even your own family, will never understand or accept you is sometimes the healthiest thing you can do. Update 3. A month has gone by since everything went down, and I now have to reveal the final part of this saga. At least now I can say that what started as a wedding drama is truly over, even though it's morphed into something I never could have anticipated. Emily lost it completely when her wedding was called off. Somehow, she got hold of my new phone number and shared it with everyone she knew. Suddenly, I was flooded with hundreds of hateful messages from strangers, her friends, and distant relatives. The threats ranged from guilt-tripping to outright intimidation. Then came the vandalism. Classic Emily, who used to do this to girls she disliked in high school, started with eggs on my car. When that didn't get the reaction she wanted, she escalated. I can't even count how many times I found my mailbox trashed, my car vandalized, or my apartment door covered in offensive notes. The final straw was when she slashed all 4 of my car tires and left a threatening note in her distinctive handwriting. Through all of this, my parents consciously chose to ignore Emily's actions. Girls will be girls, or you need to be more understanding of your sister's pain, was their standard response to every incident. They dismissed it as Emily just wanting to talk, even after I showed them security camera footage of her trying to break into my apartment. However, I was prepared, thanks to this amazing Reddit community, especially those who suggested I install security cameras and document everything. I learned from the lawyer you recommended that this wasn't just family drama, it was criminal harassment and vandalism. We built a rock-solid case, using witness statements, video evidence, photos, and hundreds of threatening messages. Emily finally realized she'd gone too far when my lawyer presented our evidence along with a cease and desist letter. The security footage of her attempted break-in was particularly damning. She tried to negotiate through her own lawyer, offering to pay for the damages if I dropped everything. However, I refused. This wasn't about money. It was about accountability and consequences. The court case moved quickly and decisively. Emily was charged with attempted breaking and entering, criminal harassment, and vandalism. She received a permanent restraining order, mandatory therapy, and a 1-year suspended sentence. The judge was particularly harsh, given the deliberate nature of her actions and the substantial evidence of her escalating behavior. My parents' reaction to the verdict was predictable. They accused me of being heartless, for ruining your sister's life over a few pranks. In fact, after I told them that Emily had repeatedly harassed me, damaged my property, and tried to break into my home, they advised me to simply move away if I felt unsafe. I never intended to speak to them again after that. The civil lawsuit was settled out of court. Emily had to pay for all the damage she'd caused, plus damages for emotional distress and lost wages. Her social media harassment campaign had cost me several freelance gigs. More importantly, the settlement included a no-contact clause that prevents our parents from acting as intermediaries or flying monkeys any longer. According to my lawyer, Emily and my parents' concerns about their reputations played a role in the speedy settlement. It turns out their concern for what their country club friends think is far greater than their concern for doing the right thing. Typical. Since then, I've moved to a new apartment in a secure building with 24/7 surveillance. My social media accounts have been shut down, my contact information has been completely updated, and my clients have been incredibly understanding about the situation. Someone who heard about my situation and was impressed by how I handled it even offered me a job. The most unexpected outcome of all this. For the first time in my life, I feel free. I'm not carrying the weight of my family's expectations and criticisms. I'm no longer the scapegoat. I'm just Michelle, building my own life on my own terms. I'm neither the dramatic nor the difficult child. My life was actually changed by the Reddit community, who helped me through everything. Your advice on documentation and security measures was crucial in court. Your supportive comments kept me going when I started to doubt myself, and your stories of similar experiences made me realize I wasn't alone. Remember that sharing DNA doesn't give someone the right to mistreat you if you're dealing with toxic family members. Sometimes the healthiest thing you can do is walk away and let them deal with the fallout from their actions. It's not about getting even. It's about setting boundaries and demanding respect. My social anxiety is improving with therapy, but it's still there. It turns out that a lot of it was linked to the constant criticism and gaslighting I experienced growing up. Who would have thought that removing toxic people could be such an effective treatment? I won't be updating anymore now that this chapter of my life is genuinely closed. I'm focusing on my education, my career, and building a new support network of chosen family. I want to thank everyone who supported me and followed my story. You gave me the courage to walk away and the strength to advocate for myself. They say living well is the best revenge. I'd add that knowing you finally stood up for yourself is the best closure. I'm done being anyone's scapegoat or victim. I've taken control of my life, and I'm never looking back. Reddit, thank you for everything and goodbye. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you.